here with Bill Blair, who has a very unique world record in the Guinness Book of World Records for, I believe the wording is most number of creatures you've played or aliens you've played.
Let me help you on that.
Okay.
It's the most special effect makeup characters portrayed in a career is the official title.
And I know you're over 200. What's the official count now?
The official record as of today still is 202, and I think I will be able to break that record sometime within the next 12 months.
202. Wow.
Now,
so,
go ahead.
Okay. So when was the first time you played a special effect makeup character then?
Well, outside of a Halloween character when I was a child, one of the first ones that I was hoping to have qualify for this record, which is going to be one of the ones I'm still working on when I break the record because I'm still looking for proof on it, is when I played Spock in a little stage show back in Dallas, Texas, at Dallas Marketplace for Oracle Software when they were still a young company introducing their networking software. And it was a stage show, basically three little vignettes set up on the same stage. One side of the stage right, had two astronauts and a cosmonaut. Stage left were three characters from Star Wars. And center stage with us was a Captain Kirk, Lieutenant Uhura, and me as Mr. Spock. And the whole message was how to get these three different entities to network and communicate with each other using Oracle software.
Wow. And that was the first one that started it all?
That's the one. That's the very first one I officially did, as a professional in public. One of the first ones that qualified and was verified for the Guinness World Record, I believe, was Alien Nation.
And then from there, I know you went on the Babylon 5 and several Star Trek,
right.
X-Files, Charmed, Invisible Man.
Sliders.
Oh, yes, Sliders. Oh, I haven't seen Sliders in a while.
Yeah.
Weren't you also in Carnival? Or Carnival?
Yeah, I was in Carnival, and, outside of the makeup and everything, I've done, sitcoms like Frasier, going clear back to Perfect Strangers in some of those days. Curb Your Enthusiasm. I did an episode of The Showbiz Show with David Spade. And then most recently, I was working full-time on and off camera on Saving Grace with Holly Hunter on TNT. And then just recently, coming up this fall, I will appear as a one-armed villain in a Comic-Con spoof on the TV show Community.
So the new season of Community. Well, that would be fun. I love that show.
Yeah, I've been getting around here and there. And then October 12th in theaters with Ben Affleck in the movie Argo, I play a robot.
Really?
Yeah.
There's robots in Argo?
Well, I don't want to give any spoilers, but yeah, there is a story within the story, and within that added story, I play a robot.
Well, that'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to that movie a lot because I rather enjoy Ben Affleck's directing movies.
Yeah, this is one where he, I think really truly one of the first major films that he has directed as well as starred in at the same time. So, that's always a challenge for an actor to, direct himself as well as everything else going on around him.
And this is the first film he's directed that's away from Boston, where he feels at home.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I guess we're going to go back a little bit to where things started. I know before you started doing TV roles and so on, you left college and you started doing I believe you started a music career.
Right. Actually, my music career started clear back when I was like 16, 17 years old. What we used to call the old high school garage bands. And that eventually graduated along with me from high school and college, and I pursued that full-time with my own bands before later joining a revival group, I guess you could say, or a next generation group of the Classics Four that at one time had the lead singer of Dennis Yost. They did the song Traces, Stormy, and Spooky. Spooky being a song that was remade by the original songwriter, Buddy Buey, who went on to form the Atlanta Rhythm Section.
Wow.
And then in that same time period, I also played a short time with the one-hit wonder group called Climax, who had that song Precious and Few back in 1972.
Wow.
And then I finished up my music career essentially at that point in time with my own group, traveling cross-country on the road, doing all the hotel and resort circuit through the upper Great Lakes area, across the country towards the mountains, and working our way towards Las Vegas. And that's where an unfortunate auto accident interrupted that tour, and essentially, even after trying to go back after 3 to 4 months from recovering, more complications from the accident occurred, and I was advised to, give up the road and the stress and everything that went along with that. And so after talking to some people and getting some opinions, I chose to go into the modeling aspect of performing in Chicago, and that is what led to the beginning of my acting career in the early 80s.
Okay, so you went from music to modeling,
right? And
so how did you get your first I guess it'd be a bit part in I guess your first film, according to IMDb, would be The Killing Floor.
Right.
So how did modeling get your first bit parts in films, and then from there to what you got with, Alienation and so on with your makeup?
Well, there is this thing, I'm not a big fan of cliches, but there is a very good one about opportunities, in that, you've got to be in the right place at the right time, be aware, and take advantage of your opportunities. Well, to answer your question specifically, I got my modeling background at what was then known as John Robert Powers Modeling and Finishing School, which is nowadays known as Powers International. I wanted to learn, obviously I'd been in music, so I needed to learn a little bit about the modeling industry and the Chicago area. So I took a program at John Robert Powers, and during that time, they were so taken by me that halfway through my program, the director of the school invited me to teach there. And in that relationship, of that opportunity, his daughter had an agency, talent agency, and they were doing the background for a PBS American Playhouse series movie of the week called The Killing Floor, as you mentioned, and asked me if I would be willing to help out and be an extra body on that show. And I said, sure, I love to help out. I might learn something too. So I went and did that, and during the day of shooting, I found what was going on. I mean, I never understood that, I had only done stage plays through high school and everything. When somebody was, yelling out, okay, this is a rehearsal, I thought to myself, wait a minute, don't you rehearse that before you ever put the show on? Why are they rehearsing it right here and now? And then I learned that they rehearse the scene and then they shoot it. So I was learning who the cameramen were. I found out who the director was in Bill Duke, and there were over 200 background there on that day, I think. I was just one of these people in the crowd, but I was trying to pay attention to what was going on, and I came across the opportunity when I heard the first assistant director or second assistant look to the person in charge of the background. So we need somebody we haven't seen yet to play security guard. And I was just within earshot and eye line, and I just held up my hand to get their attention and asked them if I could help them with that. We discussed it, and they told me to go to wardrobe and get changed. I came out as a security guard, and next thing I know, here I am up on this loading dock, if you would, with the principal actors and shooting a scene, and they turn around, and I get my very first close-up, like Mr. DeMille's ready for, and my very first film, I've got this great close-up. Everybody back home in Ohio, my parents and everybody else are getting to see this, and I'm getting phone calls, and it was a great opportunity that I just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, it sounds like you took full advantage of that, because I know from there you went on to be in, I believe it's The Imposter. It's a TV film, and then from there, according to your Wikipedia anyway, it says you moved to Dallas, and then you moved on from there to the story you told us about being Mr. Spock at the Dallas Convention Center.
Correct.
Okay, so when you started doing film, and they started saying put on the makeup and do characters like this, what was the very first character? What was it like playing your very first character in Alien Nation? And did you like doing working with makeup and stuff at first? And how did that lead to these hundreds of roles that you've had after that?
Well, let me take you through a little bit of that history and how that happened. I was working on the show Demolition Man when I met by chance, again, an opportunity, I met by chance the makeup artist from Alien Nation. His name was Richard Snell. Very well-known makeup artist that I was just having a chance to meet. I did not know him at the time. And they were looking for a teaching model so that he could teach his girlfriend and other potential makeup artists how to apply these appliances and the prosthetics and everything else. And they liked my look, and they selected me. And after a couple of sessions with them, I had this phone call out of the blue from a casting service that I work with that said, "We've got a request for you to work on Alien Nation. You would be wearing prosthetics. Are you okay with that?" And I said, "Yeah, this would be fine." I kind of knew where it was coming from. And I show up, and sure enough, there's the makeup artist, and he says, "Oh, I'm so glad you could be here," and they put me into one of the Alien Nation get-ups and started gluing all this stuff to my face, and he was really happy because there were some extreme close-ups they needed that day, and he knew that the edges from the prosthetic head would just blend right into me, and I was having the time of my life with this. I mean, it was just, to me, it was so much fun, and you really do. You look in the mirror and say, "Wow, is that really me?" And
so, looking on your resume, looks like you've worked on pretty much every major franchise that uses tons of prosthetics, except for like Doctor Who and Star Wars.
That's still on my bucket list. Yes.
So you still need to do Doctor Who. You need to talk to Stephen Moffat.
Yes.
And hope George Lucas makes more Star Wars so that you can do prosthetic. Maybe the live action show will have need of people that wear prosthetics.
Well, yeah, we hope that they still use the practical makeup, in some of these shows that, are coming out. It's so much of it is done now electronically and with the computers and motion capture and everything else that, quite honestly, as far as going, higher than this 202 and beyond, I was in a lucky time when there was a lot of practical special effects being done. People ask me a lot of times, do you think anybody will ever break your record? And I said, I don't know how many people would ever have that opportunity with less and less practical special effects makeup being done these days.
That is true, because just looking at your thing, back in the 90s there were lots of Star Trek shows going on. There was lots of sci-fi like Andromeda Strain. There's Stargate. There's Babylon 5, and nowadays we don't really have not much prosthetics to go with. Most people prefer the more realistic approach, with Law and Order and CSI and shows, like that, rather than the sci-fi. In fact, when it comes to sci-fi, I really can't think of very many right now that use prosthetics. You've got the
Vampire Diaries.
You got like Being Human.
Right. They're the human mutilated. You've got
Walking Dead.
What's the one on HBO with the vampires and stuff there? I can't remember.
True Blood.
True Blood. Thank you. They've got some of that going on, and of course you still have. And one of the last ones that I did that qualified for this 202 was when I did Resident Evil Afterlife, in which they have a lot of zombies, and zombies are very popular yet these days. So, as long as we've got some zombie movies and slasher movies going on, I think they'll still use a lot of the practical effects for that.
Yeah, and I guess within zombies you also have Walking Dead,
Right. Yes.
And you have Game of Thrones has some prosthetics and stuff as well.
But speaking of Doctor Who, it was interesting. I saw some behind-the-scenes footage of an episode one time, and these characters that appear alien, they literally are just in costume, and they essentially CGI'd in their faces in post-production. They actually didn't have to wear the makeup.
So you were saying with Doctor Who how the people are in costume, but they don't have any makeup on their face, and so they CG their faces in for whatever the creature they need.
Right. And, I mean, that's just that one episode. I don't know if they do it for every episode when they do that, but in this one particular episode that I saw, they literally, when they show the behind-the-scenes stuff, you see the full human in this costume, their faces exposed as they film or, record the scene. I don't like to say film all the time anymore because everything goes to hard drive in digital. But, and then in the episode that airs, their human face is gone and this alien face is in their place. And you see that they're not using the practical makeup. They're doing it, in the computers in post-production. It makes it a very interesting process. And then at some time I have to ask too, I wonder myself, are they actually saving money in costs doing it this way versus doing the practical? Because I'll tell you, CGI effects can get very expensive in the amount of time it takes.
Oh yes, that's one reason why the main site I work with is a Star Wars site, and they were there's a live action Star Wars TV show which they've talked about for a long time, but the reason why it hasn't been made yet is because they can't find a way to make it practical to for television costs, because they want to make Star Wars every week, but they can't afford to pay for Star Wars every single week, even though they want to use all the CGI and stuff, because it's very expensive to do what they do.
Right.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about Star Trek for a bit, since you've been involved in. I know you were involved in Deep Space Nine a lot.
Right.
I know you were involved in Enterprise and I believe Voyager.
Yes.
So was Deep Space Nine the first time you got involved in Star Trek?
Yeah, as far as the franchise itself goes, my first real episode was the House of Quark on Deep Space Nine, in which I play a member of the Klingon High Council.
Oh.
And then it just kind of evolved from there. A few episodes that season, a few more, additional episodes. And by the 6th, 7th season, I was in almost, all but, 3 or 4 episodes a season. I was in there somewhere. And we overlapped a little bit with Voyager. And then when Voyager came to an end, I was in, literally the 7th episode of the first season of Enterprise in the Andorian incident as a Vulcan monk, and then I didn't really come back again until the 4th and final season, where I several times was playing the Vulcan Cyrenite clan, I guess you might call them, which were again different types of we are introduced to the different sects of the Vulcans.
Okay, so were you like a Star Trek fan growing up, or was this just a situation where you're like, well, Star Trek is famous, it's all my career, it's be involved? Well,
no, I watched the original series when I was growing up. My brother was really the biggest of the Star Trek fans, and he and I went to one of the very first Star Trek conventions in 1972 when it came through Northeast Ohio. And that got me even more interested when we actually, for the first time, saw a black and white version of the pilot, The Cage. And that kind of got me hooked a little bit. And then when Star Trek the movies came along, I enjoyed watching those. I didn't watch the motion picture the first run of it. I saw it in I guess back then on VHS, and then when the Wrath of Khan came along as Star Trek II, that really got me really hooked on Star Trek, because I was and still am a fan of Ricardo Montalban, and I was sorry when we lost him, but he doing a reprise of his role from the original series that was such a good episode, the Space Seed, was wonderful to see him again in this show. And so from that on, I was really into it. And for the record, I did interview a half a dozen times for Star Trek The Next Generation, but was never cast in that series for the unlucky reasons that it may have been. But as an actor, we know we don't get everything, even though, like you said early on, I've been very, very lucky. And, outside of some of those shows during that time period, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel and those shows, I was fortunate enough to get on most every show that used special effect makeup.
Yeah. So one strange thing is, you were cast to do with Deep Space Nine, and then you were also on Babylon 5, two shows which are very similar, especially how they started, and there was controversy when they both started about who stole whose idea.
Right.
So what was it like to work on two shows very similar at the same time, where there was lots of controversy between? Did anyone on set notice that there was controversy between them, or was it just you doing your job and let the bigwigs handle the
as far as being on each set, there was very little conversation, if any, about one show versus the other. It was, oddly enough, mostly in the public that they, for some reason, thought that Babylon 5 was connected to Star Trek, and did not realize or understand that it was a story and a world all unto its own, and not owned by the Star Trek franchise or anything. And for what it's worth, it is a fact in my book that Michael J. Straczynski had pitched Babylon 5 to Paramount, and when it got turned down and Warner Brothers picked it up, Paramount came back and said, okay, I guess we should do something, to stay up with them, and that's when Deep Space Nine was developed.
I know for me personally, Deep Space Nine is my favorite of the Star Treks, with Next Generation following suit, because Deep Space Nine I thought was the most unique of them all, and it had like the Dominion War and so on. So I personally like Deep Space Nine better than Babylon 5, but I know there's lots of people that argue that till the cows come home.
There was the situation. There's arguments on both sides about who liked or who didn't like Deep Space Nine. It seems like there's no middle ground of, well, it was okay. People like the original Gene Roddenberry premise that Star Trek was like Wagon Train to the stars, and Deep Space Nine just kind of being in its own place and dealing with more of the interpersonal relationships between the main characters that happened was not to everybody's taste, and quite frankly, some of the ratings did go down in a couple of seasons where that became more of a focus than what you just mentioned in the Dominion War and the early conflicts between the Cardassian, the Bajoran races, and things like that provided for a lot more action.
So now we're going to move on just a little bit, and then we'll probably come back to Star Trek later on. Being that you've worked a lot with special effects and makeup, have you had a chance to meet with some of the all-time greats, like people like Rick Baker and...
There was an occasion, actually, that the first time I met Rick Baker in person was when I was interviewing for the Mark Wahlberg version of the Planet of the Apes. It was a big casting call, and I happen to know, too, that one of Rick Baker's model designers was somebody I had worked with on Star Trek, as well as on some other projects that they did. And so when Rick Baker was meeting me, he'd heard about me, and when he met me for the first time, he was very intrigued with my portfolio of makeup characters that I had done, plus his designer's recommendation of me, and immediately, wanted me to work on the show, but I had to go through another process with Tim Burton and the producers, and fortunately there I also got picked. But for what it's happened, I never did get to work on the movie. Casting never sent me. I don't know what happened communication-wise, but it was a sad thing. So I actually never got to be on a set with Rick Baker. I'm still hoping for that someday before he fully retires. But yeah, I thought it was great that I had the opportunity to meet what I consider, one of the, younger fathers of some of the special effect makeup techniques and designs that have been done over many. And other than that, I never got to meet Stan Winston or Webb, and so, some of these people, of course, I've met, almost all of the Westmore family that was in the industry at the time during Star Trek. And Michael Westmore was a big supporter of my Guinness World Record, having, witnessed many of the characters, obviously, that I had done on Star Trek. And an interesting side story is, while I was on Star Trek doing these, his new daughter-in-law was coming into the business, and he brought her directly to me one morning and had me be one of her very first makeups on Star Trek, because he knew that I could help guide her as well.
Wow. That is really cool.
Yeah, that to be recognized by some of these people as, for what I've done and have accomplished, it just gives me a really big smile.
And then don't worry about Rick Baker, though. As we learned with Men in Black 3, there's still lots of practical makeup work to be done, and he did an amazing job with Men in Black 3 as far as the makeup goes, because I don't know if you've seen it, but most of that was, done practically, and it shows how Rick Baker has his, 10 Academy Awards now for makeup.
Yes. And it was very not able to get myself onto that particular movie. It would have been a lot of fun, but it would have been a lot of fun. I have yet to actually see that movie. I never got to the theaters to see it, so I'm just going to have to wait for it. But I would have, that being the third, I don't know if there'll be a fourth or not for me to get a shot at again. But I've got some connections, and hopefully I'll get a word out to Rick Baker that says, hey, whatever your next project is, I am still dying to get on set with you.
He is definitely one of the best, if not the best.
Yeah.
There's arguments there.
Well, and he grew up with some with Stan Winston. He had some really good mentors himself.
Yes, he did. Okay, so we're going to move just a little bit on to some of the other things which you've done. I know you've been featured in some books, because when I mentioned to one of my friends that you'd be on, he showed me a zombie book called, I believe it's called The Brain Eater's Bible.
That's correct.
So, what's it like being able to, first of all, you've worked with music, you've worked with, television, worked with film, worked with lots of makeup and so on, and then suddenly you see yourself featured in books. Is that just really strange for you, or is it just like, you just take it in stride?
To me, it's just all the same industry. It's an industry of entertainment, and the Brain Eater's Bible is no less than just great entertainment. And again, I know we keep getting away from it, but it keeps coming back around. A makeup artist that I had worked with on Star Trek, and also in another movie called Monster Night, I believe what it was called. It was originally titled Trick or Treat. He had contacted me about this project coming up called The Brain Eater's Bible, and they were going to be doing a lot of zombies. And he said, he wondered if I'd be interested in doing that, and because he had it was coming up around Halloween time, and he has his own special effects makeup company, and they were getting ready to do their fall catalog and everything, and he had a new piece that he wanted to put on me so he could feature it in his new catalog. And of course I said, sure, it sounds like fun, let's do it.
Nice.
I honestly never turned down the opportunity to have something glued on my face.
Okay, and I know also you've written a book called The Professional's Talent Handbook, a guide to getting started. So is this about how people can get involved in the industry and how they can get their foot in the door then?
This was a book that I wrote back right after my teaching days at John Robert Powers, and it includes a lot of, unfortunately nowadays, a little bit of out-of-date information. I mean, in that book I talk about, the professional attitude, of course, and professionalism in, creating a good image for yourself. But unfortunately, in there, it's mentioned about answering machines and, pagers and certain things that you want to make sure you avail yourself of, where nowadays it would be, voicemail and computers and the internet and cell phones and everything else. But the basic information, the foundations for it still remain the same. And in that book, I talk about my personal philosophy of what's called the 3Ds, which is desire, dedication, and drive, which apply not only to the modeling and acting industries and entertainment, but can apply to any business in life and any degree of success you might achieve.
Okay, so some questions about that then, because I know we have some listeners that really want to get involved in the industry. Some of them want to do voice acting. Some of them just want to, do acting in general. Some of them just want to get involved in any way they can. So, what are some of the quick tips that you can give them to help them get involved or get their foot in the door, at least, be on a level playing field with some of the other people that might have more experience already?
Wow. A lot of it, I'll tell you these days, for your listeners, is where you live. Obviously, if you're not in New York or Los Angeles, there's going to be less opportunities for you. However, in today's market, if you live in Atlanta, you live in North Carolina, you live in the New Orleans, Baton Rouge area of Louisiana, you live in the New Mexico, Arizona, Southern Nevada triangle there are a lot of opportunities because the industry has spread out throughout the United States now. It's not just focused in New York and L.A. Chicago has a tremendous amount still of movies that come through there and commercial work. The Texas area, a lot of movies and a lot of industrials and commercials are shot in Texas. So if you live, let's just say, in the middle of Kansas or the middle of Missouri or the middle of Iowa or something, your opportunities are going to be limited. However, even in those remote areas, if you have community theater, which almost, I think, everybody somewhere has that because there are people that want to be in the acting fields, whether it's amateur or professional. And so getting into those community theaters to get some experience, especially if they've done high school theater or college theater, continue on with that. The one thing that I've always told people, people say the only way you fail is if you give up. But my rule is that you can give up today, you can give up tomorrow, give yourself a little vacation, but you have persistence. It means you come back to it. You haven't really given up. You just take a little break from it. Anytime that you wear yourself out, if you work at it too hard, sometimes it becomes more of a burden, or the amount of rejection that we get in this industry can really be a weight on your shoulders. So don't let that get to you. Just say, okay, the next one around the corner, I'm going to be there for it. As I started out with our conversation, opportunities are there. You just have to be aware of them and then take advantage of them. Another famous phrase, opportunities are never missed. They're just passed on to the next person. So be there when that opportunity comes by. And if you really are serious and it's something that you have a passion for, and I mean, when you think of doing anything in your life, you think of this industry 24 hours a day, then you are ready to pursue a career in this industry, because it is 24 hours a day that you have to be on. It's just something that, personally myself, I'm thinking about it day in and day out. And I still even think about my music. I wish I could, sometimes I would love to be back, in a band. I'd love to be performing music live on a stage, but that just hasn't been in the cards for me the last couple of decades. But maybe someday I will get back to that. I've not given up on it. It's just on the back burner while I'm focusing on all my acting and other parts of the industry. So if this is something your listeners, and I invite your listeners to look me up on the internet. If they just type my name, Bill Blair, into a Google search bar, I will be the first half a dozen results to come up on that first page, and they can find a way to contact me. I am happy to answer questions for people. If they'd write to me, I'll give them my insights. They can tell me where they live, and if there's something that I can suggest for their area, I'll be happy to do so.
That's fantastic. I know quite a few people. Well, yeah, I know quite a few people that will definitely take you up on that offer. And at the very end, we'll make sure we have contact information so that they can just go right away. Because I'm looking at your resume right now, which they have on IMDb, and it shows how you did lots of theater yourself. You were on Fiddler on the Roof and Guys and Dolls and Best Christmas Pageant Ever. It shows that you didn't have to be the lead, but you were involved and you've done lots of stuff. Like on your resume, we have voiceover. There's industrial stuff, there's hosting, there's theater, there's commercials, there's television. You've done lots of things. So by the looks of it, you yourself have been the one that, anytime an opportunity knocks, you take it rather than sitting and waiting for a better one. Yeah, you always answer the door by the looks of things.
Yes, and the one other thing I wanted to mention, as far as people that are interested, one of the most important aspects of this industry, entertainment, music, theater, television, film, is called networking. And if you don't understand what that word means, here's a real basic. Get to know other people that want to do the same thing you do, and find someone who's a step above you on that ladder to success. If you think somebody is that step above you, that is somebody you want to connect with and hang on to, because a lot of ways people get into the industry is by somebody opening a door for them. What you do on the other side of the door, a lot of times, is up to you. But I've opened the door for many people, and I'll tell you what, some of the people I've opened the door for are even more successful than I am right now. And I'm very proud of that because, I love being the catalyst for someone.
Nice. That's really cool.
So, yeah, but I've enjoyed every aspect of the entertainment industry since, I was a teenager. I love performing, and I love being in front of people. There's just a certain thrill that comes from that. And while I've got a moment, for your listeners, I want to say thank you to all of them who have ever watched a show that I've been on, whoever followed me on the internet throughout my career, or just becoming new fans right now, because without all of you people that have watched me or heard of me or listened to me or looked me up, I wouldn't have the great job, I don't even think of it as a job. I get to play. I've had such a great career, and it's thanks to all of them.
And we love supporting you. We especially like it because, a lot of the time when we watch shows and we watch movies and so on, we just think of these people as, they're there. We'll never get to see them, never get to speak to them. I know one thing that I really like about running a podcast is I've been able to meet people and talk with people that I thought would never, I'd never be able to talk to before because, they were always there and I'm here and it's like a wall between you. But, stuff like this help, separate that wall and realize that, people like you are actual real people who had real challenges and were able to make it where we just think we can, we're just dreaming that we can get there now.
Well, I've got a fun little story I like to tell when I appear live at conventions around the country and around the world, and I talk to the fans, and they all, like yourself, you think that, we're so unreachable and everything, or that you'd never have a chance to meet us in person or talk to us like we were a neighbor. I like to remind people that, I'm just like you. I'm like everyone else. I essentially go to an office. My office is maybe in a different place every day or every week, but I am just like you. I have this place that I go to make a living, just like you do. The only difference is you get to see me on a television. So you know what? One of these days, I'm going to come and put a chair up outside your cubicle in your office. I'm going to watch you all day because you're just like me, and I think it would be entertaining to watch what you do for your job and your living.
That's a cool story. And yeah, so I guess a couple more questions before we start wrapping things up. So, we've talked about how you've gotten all these, lucky breaks and so on. Has there ever been an opportunity that knock that you wish you had taken up, that you weren't able to at the time, decided not to? Maybe you were, ill or busy. Has there ever been an opportunity that you wish you had been able to take up, other than, of course, Rick Baker, which wasn't, in your hands?
There is one that always comes to the top of the list, and it actually was one that was just an unfortunate situation. A matter of fact, it brings up something current at the same time. I have actually, until the new Star Trek movie comes out this next year, which is, the new Christopher Pine cast and everything.
Yeah.
I have never been in a Star Trek movie. And what's odd, the one that's coming out, I don't appear in makeup. I'm actually as a human, which is a little ironic. But it goes back, the one that comes to the top of my list is First Contact. I interviewed for that basically 3 times. The initial interview, I went to the first callback, I got to the second callback, and then they had the third callback. And on that third callback, it was scheduled for the same date that I was already obligated by contract to be shooting a movie in San Francisco. So I missed the third callback, and as in this industry, a lot of times, out of sight, out of mind. Even though I called the production office and I talked to the people involved and said, I can't be there. I want to be, but I've got a contract and I have to be in San Francisco on that day. Please don't forget me. And if there's any way that I could see you the next day, I would love it. And they assured me, said, don't worry, we know who you are. It's not a problem. But because this was in front of the producers and everybody else, it was just a situation that literally they were only going to consider the ones that showed up.
That's unfortunate. First Contact was a fantastic film.
Yeah, I would have loved to have been in that. I did finally, though, get to work with James Cromwell, which was one of my desires through the years, having followed him in a lot of different movies. I finally got to work with him up close and personal on The Artist.
Oh, you were on. So you were on The Artist.
I was in The Artist. I played one of the studio engineers in John Goodman's office.
Oh, I saw that movie actually the other day. It's an interesting film. I was surprised it won Best Picture, but wow. So, and I know you've also been able to work with directors. I know you worked with Ivan Reitman.
Yes.
I know you worked with Paul Thomas.
I've also worked with his son.
Oh, really? Where did you work with his son then?
The first movie I worked on with him that I can remember was called "Thank You for Not Smoking."
Ah, thank you. Well,
the
one with
Smoking.
"Thank You for Smoking." Yeah, with Aaron Eckhart.
Yes.
So you got to work with both Reitmans.
Yes.
And you worked with Paul Thomas Anderson. I know because you were on The Master, I believe.
Right. That was just out.
Okay. So, which do you prefer, film or television?
Wow.
You'd be able to do both.
That actually, nobody's ever asked me that question before. Congratulations. Actually, I've never thought that I had a preference. Film sometimes can be much more lucrative, and as an actor, since it moves a lot slower in terms of production time, we don't have to learn as many lines of dialogue at one time. But television sometimes can be a lot more steady. I mean, you do a film that you're hired for, and you might shoot, anywhere from maybe 2 to 3 months on it, and you're done. And then you've got to go find another job. On television, if I get lucky enough, like when I was on Saving Grace or I was on Babylon 5 or I was on Star Trek, I was pretty confident that I was going to have a job for a couple, 3 or 4. And in terms of Babylon 5 and Star Trek, between the two, I was working steadily for almost 10 years.
Wow, and that's a blessing in your industry.
Yes, I mean, I couldn't have asked for anything more. So, from a financial and stability standpoint, I love TV, but I do love doing the features because there's a higher production value in doing film because they can afford to take more time, and there's nothing like seeing yourself blown up on a big screen, 40 feet tall.
Okay, so some questions now about, the actual process of, being in makeup and so on. So has there ever been, a time where any stories that say when you're using the prosthetics and so on that, your body or skin just didn't like it at all, and so you had to either stop a role or had to postpone playing a role because your body just rejected prosthetics, or you just had, reaction to it or anything like that? Because I know some people that have done it and they have, reaction to latex sometimes, or just reaction to some of the stuff, and so they've had issues. But have you had anything like that happen?
Actually, that's one of the reasons I've worked for so long doing this. I have a skin type and metabolism and I don't know, physiology that latex just works with me. I've only had one small issue, and that's when we remove the makeup. Sometimes we remove it with what's called isopropyl myristate, which is a alcohol-based chemical, and it's the myristate portion of the alcohol that apparently my skin is sensitive to. So we just use a different remover with me. But as far as the adhesives, the things, the makeup itself, I have no problems with it whatsoever. I, am not claustrophobic, so there's no anxieties or anything when I am completely encased in a costume or something like that.
Okay. And since you've been in, Star Trek and Babylon 5, the most, I believe we'll say the most, because that's 10 years of your career right there. Is there a particular type of alien or creature that you really like to play? Like, anytime they give you an opportunity to be that, you're just, you're giddy, you're excited to be in that role?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of that. A character, a makeup character?
Yeah, a character or a creature or an alien in Star Trek or Babylon 5 that whenever they have an opportunity to play this type of creature or alien, you're just really giddy to be in it?
Okay, one thing I don't try to do is mix my Babylon 5 and my Star Trek world. They're they're different
we'll
parts,
say Star Trek.
But I have favorites in each one of them. There's no question about that. In Babylon 5, anytime they wanted to put me in the Narn, I was happy with that. I loved that makeup. But I personally identified more with the Minbari because I am more of that spiritual, passive personality, but can still turn on you if you do me wrong. On Star Trek, there was nothing better than playing a Klingon because no matter whether it was the original series or the Next Generation and on, whenever they changed the look of the Klingon, everybody knew what a Klingon was. Even the public, had heard about a Klingon, could tell you a little something about them usually. But my favorite, whenever I played what were called Westmore aliens, these were the alien races that did not have race names. They were not from any particular world. But when you're on Deep Space Nine, you just couldn't have Cardassian and Klingons and this type of stuff walking around the station. You had to make it look like people from the entire galaxy were passing through there. So Westmore aliens is where we took different pieces and parts of different characters that had been used throughout Star Trek Nation. And we mixed and matched and made something up new every time we got to do what was called a Westmore alien. And that was fun because we never knew what we were going to come up with until we were finished. So
have you ever been given the option to create the creature yourself, like decide what you want on your face, or is it always the makeup artist?
This was the fun part. Michael Westmore, which is what the Westmore aliens were named after, he and the makeup artist would just pull out a bunch of pieces, and then when I got in there, they'd look at it, and we'd all just, between me and the makeup artist, we'd just collaborate a little bit and say, oh, let's try this or let's try that. So it was it was a team effort between the makeup artist and myself a lot of the times. But there is one classic character that always sticks out in my mind, and there's a little story that goes with that. I was working on a project with Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, on a project where I got to play Frankenstein's monster, one of the classic Universal monsters.
Yeah.
What was unique about this was our stylist on that project was from Universal, and she had gotten permission to pull the actual costume that Fred Gwynne wore on the Munsters out of the archives for me.
Ooh.
So I got to wear a piece of history of one of our classic television shows from the 1960s that I don't know how many people have gotten to do that outside of me.
When you put that on, did you have to do the monster mash for a little bit?
Well, if you were to see the video, you would see we did something very similar to it. Actually, it was a 5-minute pre-show to go into the Elvira attraction during Halloween at Six Flags and other amusement parks that featured that particular attraction.
Okay, so I have two more questions for you. One of them is this one I have to ask because I have a friend that would really want to know. As I mentioned, we're big Star Wars fans, and so if you were, since you've done all these creatures and so on, if you were given the opportunity to play in George Lucas's sandbox, so to speak, and be whatever type of creature or costume you want, since there's tons to choose from. Is there any particular one you'd really like to be if you could be one?
If they could squeeze me into a CP30, it would be a blast. But
especially if you could be a droid and be with Anthony Daniels at the same time.
Something like that. Yeah, I wouldn't want to share one with him, but I think it would.
But
I think it'd be great if I could be the robots, the truly futuristic looks. I mean, there's just something fun about that. That's different even from looking like fantasy type creatures.
And if you get to work with Anthony Daniels at the same time, that's better.
Yeah, and all those guys. I mean, I'm very good acquaintances with Chewbacca.
Peter Mayhew, nice.
Peter Mayhew and his family, and I've met Kenny Baker. Who he's just the most fun. He and his wife are just the most fun, jovial people, and thinking of him inside that little R2-D2 suit, it's great. I've met a lot of the Star Wars people, Jeremy Bullock, and it's a lot of fun, and they're great people. And yes, it's just like if I got an invite to work on one of those movies or anything with George Lucas, it was just be like, sign me up. How much do I have to pay you?
I'll give you my life savings. Just put me in. Okay, so one of the things that we like to do with all of our guests is we like to give them what we call the soapbox. So we're going to give you the opportunity to, if you have anything, any current production, any cause, or anything you want to promote, even if it's yourself, we're going to give you the opportunity to really say whatever you want and promote whatever you'd like. So if you wanted to give your contact information, anything like that, you've already given some of it, of course.
Right.
But like any current cause, any current project you want to promote or promote yourself, you have an opportunity now to have the soapbox, and the floor is yours.
Well, I'll try to make this a Reader's Digest version of what's coming up and what they can do to get in touch with me. Coming up October 12th, as I mentioned earlier, in theaters with Ben Affleck, I'm in the movie Argo as a robot. Currently in theaters, if you haven't seen it already, The Master. And coming out, I think it's scheduled for a December release now, the movie Hitchcock with Sir Anthony Hopkins, who I also had the privilege of being directed by in a movie that he starred and directed in a while back. And then next year, as I mentioned, watch for me in the new Star Trek movie. And currently, coming up this fall on Community, watch for the episode, I think it's the 4th episode of the new season, in which I play that one-armed villain. It's a spoof of a Comic-Con type convention. And as far as personal appearances, I just recently, if any of your listeners are in the area, watch out for next year for a convention called Consplosion. It takes place in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Great convention, especially if you're into the cosplay, anime, and those kinds of areas. Another convention in Kansas City, Missouri called Con X. It's very much a media. You get a chance to meet and shake the hands of some of your favorite celebrities. A lot of great gaming that goes on there, as well as other special features. So you'll want to look that one up too. Again, it's called Con X. Takes place in Kansas City, Missouri. It'll probably be again in September of next year. For myself, I just made a deal and I agreed to appear at a convention called Uncon in Ohio. I think it's in around Dayton, Ohio, and it'll be they're having their convention this year. As a matter of fact, this coming weekend, first weekend of October, and then I will be appearing there next year during the same time period. And for those listeners that are interested in that general area, we will be doing a live makeup demonstration where you will get to see me go from human into some creature, character, alien, and you'll have a photo opportunity with me, and then you'll get a chance to see how we take it off safely to protect your skin, so that when you're 75, you'll only look like you're 50. And then I'm just working on a deal to appear at a convention called Dark Side in Germany next year. And I've been there once before. It's been about 6 years since I've been there. So it'll be 7 when I get back there next year. But Germany has some of the greatest science fiction fans in the world. And I enjoy going there a lot. It's always a treat. So that's what's happening industry-wise for me right now. There'll be more conventions, so watch my website, which is www.alienactor.com. That's alienactor, all one word, .com. There's a section on the left side of my homepage where it talks about my upcoming appearances. You can also link there to my IMDb, which will tell you occasionally what shows are going to be on television in reruns that you can spot me in. And on the lower left-hand side of my homepage, there is a link to my YouTube channel where you can see a video of my Guinness World Record certificate presentation at the Guinness World Record Museum on Hollywood Boulevard that occurred last year. You just click on the link there, and it'll take you right to that channel, and you can see everything that happened that day. Watch me show up in a 40-foot stretch limousine.
Wow.
And in character. It's a lot of fun. And there's a link on my webpage. All your listeners can contact me if they want. They can also find me on Facebook. You know, I have a very high presence on Facebook. If you type in Bill Blair in the search, it'll find a way to link to me there. I'll be happy to have more friends and fans. There's also the Bill Blair fan page on Facebook where some different information appears about me, and that is strictly for the fans.
Nice. Okay, so that's how people can contact you. I know we're going to send some people your way. On Facebook especially is how we like to, thank people and talk to people. A lot of our fans use Facebook.
And make sure you follow me on Twitter at Alien Actor.
Okay. Well, this has been fantastic. I love talking about people, in the industry. I love talking about, stuff like the makeup and so on, because it's the type of things that we don't usually talk about, the type of people that do so much work that, usually get left behind, or, we just don't think about them. And, when we finally get to peek behind the curtain with, stories like this, it's fascinating to me, and I know our listeners are going to quite enjoy it. And so thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure.
So before we let you go, do you have any questions perhaps for us or anything you'd like to, ask us, since I guess I never gave the opportunity to ask anything?
Oh, no, that's quite all right. I enjoy answering the questions. I would just, again, it goes back to your listeners and everybody. Feel free to write me questions. I'm happy to share what information I've got, what I've accumulated over my 3 decades in this business. And, there's nothing better than, information is great, but it has no value to me unless I can share it. I thank you so much for